I was a big fan of Fallen Order. Sure, it had performance issues and its gameplay hardly broke new ground, but give me a solid single-player Star Wars game, free from any hints of microtransactions or battle passes, and I'll give you my time. Now we have its bigger, more ambitious and more refined sequel with Jedi Survivor. But is it the chosen one? I'll say this up front. If you fundamentally disliked Fallen Order, you fundamentally won't like Jedi Survivor. It's still more or less the same Souls-like Metroidvania action game, with bonfire-like checkpoints that restore health stims and respawn enemies, lots of dodging, blocking and breaking stamina involved in the combat, and a whole bunch of levels that gate stuff off until you return with the right gear. But if you were kinda on the fence, well then Jedi Survivor has made some big improvements that might just force pull you back in. Off the bat, Cal has every power from the first game, so as soon as things kick off, you already feel powerful. And in general, Jedi Survivor's combat feels a lot snappier and punchier. The addition of dismemberment goes a very long and gruesomely satisfying way to giving the action a real sense of oomph. Sure, it's only a visual touch, but it just feels wrong when lightsabers don't cut people's arms off, right? The audio work on the saber also deserves some special props. Just listen to this bad boy shred. There's also much more depth to combat thanks to the addition of more stances to choose from, 2 of which can be assigned and hot swapped between at any time. You can stick to the balanced, tried and true single saber, go for a bit more range and crowd control with double bladed sabers and live your Darth Maul fantasy, dish out speedy blows with dual sabers, be a slow but heavy hitting emo Kylo Ren type with the crossguard, or even unleash your inner scoundrel with a blaster saber combo to give yourself some range. The blaster has limited shots, which build up as you land saber attacks, so don't fret about it turning this into a third-person shooter. Having multiple playstyles and movesets to swap between just opens up a lot more choice and room for experimentation. When it comes to using the Force, Cal still mostly relies on the staples of Force push and pull to fling foes around. And honestly, I don't think I'll ever get sick of pulling someone straight onto my saber or yeeting them off a cliff. I very much appreciate how enemies love to just stand and admire the view next to a good endless abyss. There's also now the ability to mind trick enemies into fighting for you briefly, which definitely comes in handy in busy battles. The upgrade tree is much deeper now, with each stance getting its own tree, and there's plenty of unlockable moves to augment whichever powers or stances you like to use. And you will need to focus on what speaks to you, as it'll take some impressive grinding to get anywhere near maxing out every upgrade on your first playthrough. There's also a new perk system that offers a range of minor to major gameplay tweaks, from upping damage on certain attacks or just giving more XP on kills, to completely rebalancing the game into a mode where enemies and Cal can only take a hit or two, which certainly adds a bit of extra replay value, especially for those diving into New Game Plus. Cal also ends up becoming much more mobile over the adventure, and he was no slouch before with all his wall running and double jumping. But thanks to the addition of every good sequel's go-to piece of gear, a grapple hook, and an extra dash move, Cal can now pull off some serious acrobatics. I've been on the record as saying I'm no fan of climbing in games, but thankfully Jedi Survivor tends more towards being a platformer as opposed to just having tons of cliffs to climb, and what bits of pure climbing there are blissfully speedy. Another area that's had a lot of love put into it is customization. Just about everything you could possibly want, and many things you probably didn't even think of, can be customized. You can build your own saber from colors and materials, right down to how shiny those materials are. And the same applies to almost everything, from your clothes to your blaster, and of course, BD1. And just look at this adorable animation when you customize him. Oh. My favorite additions are definitely Cal's hair and beard options though, and I'm just gonna say it, Cal with a stash and some scruffy hair, he's hot and he can get it. Cameron Monaghan, if you're watching, hit me up. One thing I was slightly underwhelmed with was the amount of locations to explore. Most of the game takes place on just 2 planets, Koboh and Jedha, with the remaining few levels being much smaller, more linear affairs, which apart from one, you visit only once across the story. Koboh is clearly the main star of Jedi Survivor. It's orders of magnitude bigger than any location in Fallen Order, and is basically a whole bunch of worlds rolled into one, featuring distinct areas like a floating fortress and a broken down core ship. It's also got a little outpost and saloon that you call home, which dishes out side quests and opens up a bunch of enjoyably pointless stuff to do, like finding fish for a fish tank, plants for a rooftop garden, and songs for a DJ bot. And there's even a little tactics minigame you can play. I say they're pointless, but some actually do have little rewards, so they're fun distractions that don't feel like you're entirely wasting your time. And I felt like they gave me a nice sense of having a little place to call my own. Scattered around Kobo, you'll find puzzle rooms, challenges, bounties, extra bosses, and tons of collectibles to add to your customization options. Although why exactly Cal's man bun is hidden in a crate here, who knows? Probably best not to ask. BD1 also gets a couple of handy new abilities to give him a bit more use in solving puzzles. One which lets him spray a foam needed for burning away muck, and another that lets him shoot an electro bolt to activate certain objects. And perhaps one of the biggest and best quality of life improvements is simply the addition of being able to fast travel between checkpoints, so thankfully you won't be needing to backtrack through large sections of levels anymore, unless the story calls for it of course. Now of course Jedi Survivor is a very story-driven game, so I'm going to be frugal on the plot details and steer clear of spoilers. But the basic setup is that we step back into the shoes of Cal Kestis 5 years on from Fallen Order's conclusion. Cal's clearly been on a mission to make life as hard as possible for the Empire, and when he hears about a mysterious lost planet that even the Empire can't reach, he figures it may just be the perfect hiding spot for him and his merry band of troublemakers.
Yes, you could just disappear completely. No Bedlam Raiders, no bounty hunters,
No Galactic Empire.
I won't say any more than that on the plot, except that I thought it was a great story. It's set in just about my favourite era of Star Wars, and it hits the right dirty, gritty, and slightly goofy sci-fi tone that I think Star Wars should. But what really sold it for me were the characters. Cal makes for a really likeable lead that's easy to empathise with and root for throughout his struggles. And he's surrounded by a great cast of new and returning faces that run the gamut of Star Wars tropes, from lovable rogues, stern Jedi, powerful villains, and of course, wacky aliens and droids.
This is the one who stood up to the Bedlam Raiders!
All right, that's enough, Turgle.
Torgal?
Get over here.
Yes.
But they're all well-rounded, interesting characters, with clear motivations, excellent performances, and the major characters all get some great little moments together. Visually, it's also a very impressive game, especially with ray tracing. I was often spinning around in dark rooms just admiring how detailed the shadows my sabers cast were. Unfortunately though, performance was pretty rough. While I can't comment on console performance, I did run it on a pretty solid PC with a 3090, and with the Day Zero patch and the latest graphics drivers installed, I still found it suffered from some regular stutter and sudden massive frame rate drops that usually didn't have any clear cause, much like I experienced in Fallen Order. For reference, I did play it at very silly settings, with everything cranked to epic and with ray tracing on, with AMD's super resolution set to quality mode. And for the most part it was perfectly playable, but the stutter and frame rate drops were real and frequent. I also checked it out running at the lowest possible settings with ray tracing off just to compare, and I still found frame rates would suddenly tank into single digits and it would still struggle to hit 60 FPS in many areas. So be warned, it's a demanding game. Fingers crossed there's some performance optimizations coming soon. Still, frame rate drops weren't enough to stop me from having a great time with Jedi Survivor. It's a sprawling and deep action game with a great emotional core to the story. If you're a Star Wars fan or a fan of action games in general, this might just be the game you're looking for. Play.